Okay, so we've given it a couple of days now to, well, about a day in an airing cupboard to let the varnish thoroughly harden off, and I've started to apply some of the markings to the model. Now, one of the first things I should say was that I originally intended to do the Canadian Forces aircraft. However, when I came to start applying the decals, I was looking at the shade of grey used on the markings here and the shade of grey of the model, and they looked virtually identical, which would have meant that the decals, the markings, wouldn't have stood out sufficiently against the model's paint. Now, whether that's me who's done this slightly too dark or these decals are slightly too light, I wouldn't like to say, but however, that's what we're left with at the moment. So I had to default to another option, and so what I've done is I've gone for the RAF aircraft. Now, when this kit was first released, I did get these draw decals markings, and I also got the extra decal sheet. So I've got plenty of options for what I'm doing, and I might yet use a few of these draw decals markings. But for now, we're sticking to the a mixture of the extra decals markings for a 99 Squadron aircraft from the RAF, and the kit markings are being used for things like our stencil data. With reference to obviously the kit instruction sheet for the stencil data and the extra decal instruction sheet for the general aircraft national markings and squadron markings and stuff. Now, quite a few of the decals on the extra decal sheet come in multiple parts. 99 Squadron Panther on the tail is black with a red outline, so they've supplied you with a solid red Panther and a slightly smaller solid black Panther to lay over it to give the outline. And the Union flags, which go above the doors here, are actually in three parts. The red, white and blue, each part is an individual piece, which is it allows you, I suppose, to deal with the registration yourself, but it does sort of mean that any given decal takes 3 times as long to apply because you've got to go at it 3 times. However, that's where we are. So fortunately, the kit decals that I've got to use for the stencil data are really nice. I've applied the tail walkways here, and they've bedded in really nicely with a little bit of Solvaset over some of the areas where there appeared to be a bit of silvering. So we're happy to use the kit stencil data. So what I'm going to do now is there's a couple of areas. There's a forward area and a rear area of the centre line. So just cutting the that decal out, and this includes the refueling probe area over the nose. Now, one thing I have discovered over the years is that with decals that have a large area of carrier film, if you just use a sharp knife blade or a pin or anything really, and just gently pierce the area of the carrier film multiple times, particularly over the clearer areas, it doesn't affect the integrity of the decal, but it does give plenty of small holes for decal softeners and the like to work into, and also for air and stuff to escape. So what we're going to do is we're just going to plunge that into some warm hot water for a few seconds. I'm planning just to show you one or two of the decals. I mean, everybody applies decals, we know how it works, but I'm just showing you my method. Things like piercing the decal multiple times and that sort of thing. So all we're doing, so this decal is already coming loose, okay. I'm just going to drop some water over the entire area where this decal has got to go. And then with that done, I'm just going to slide the decal off like so. And then slide it into place. Now the decal comes right forward and over the actual canopy area as well, so I'm hoping you can kind of see that. So it's important to get it centrally located and straight. Okay, so there is a distinct panel line which you saw me restore earlier, which the rear of this marking has to go up against, because there are markings that butt up to it in terms of more of the walkway markings. So these will remain movable for a short while, so I'm just going to pat away any of the excess water from it, and then I'm just going to check it's centrally located again, and then I'm just going to, now because of all those little holes I punched in this, all of the moisture has come out from under the decal, so it's settling down really nicely. What I'd be tempted to do is leave that to dry for a while, come back, and it'll immediately become apparent if there's going to be any silvering, and then you can attack it with a bit of Solvaset or your favourite kind of decal softening solution. But that's how we're working over the model. There's a lot of walkway stuff that needs to go onto the wings, and that is all best done a small bit at a time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add, there's another large section of walkway that goes from basically the tail forward to the wing. So it's a case of looking to see where this joins, and again I'm just going to go over it. Just multiple little stabs, plunge it into the water and leave it for a few seconds, and then we can look at applying that. So again, bit of water over here, and looking at the instructions, the front of this actually locks into the curved sections. The curved section you saw me rescribing in an earlier video, that is where the front of this eventually will locate. So gently manipulating it off the decal sheet, off the backing sheet. Okay, and then once again I'm just going to and there's that one applied as well, which has gone almost, I have to say, into exactly the right location straight from the off. So So that's that walkway more or less in place. So I'm just going to pad away the excess liquid as before, and we're still in a position where it's very mobile, so we can gently, I say gently, I'm making a right balls up of this, aren't I? But it's not damaging the decal. The decal's plenty strong enough to take this kind of treatment, so it's nothing to lose any sleep over. Okay, and then we can straighten out the forward edges here and see where it's left us. So where it's left us is that we're still a little bit off centre, and now we're pretty much dead centre now. So I'm just going to move that forward like so. And then we're going to have a look at that again. And the thing with these long decals is the main thing is to make sure that they're as straight as they can be, and in this instance that they're sitting as close to dead centre between panel details as we can get them. So hopefully you can see those two decals that have been applied. So we'll let that dry overnight, and there's really no substitute for just taking your time with this kind of job. So we've got the two Panthers here, so let's have a look at. They're both the same. They both face the same direction. So there's not one for one side and one for the other side. So either one will do. They both face to the left. So what we're going to do, I've already got the red one on. Wait for it to come loose, and then slide it off of the backing, and then lining it up is up to you. So if the registration's off when this is dry, the only people to blame for this is your good self. So that is pretty much good enough. So I hope you can see that that Black Panther with the red outline on the tail there. So this is what we're going to do. We're just going to work across the model slowly but surely, letting pieces of large decal dry before we move on to the next part, and just working. It's going to take probably 2 or 3 days to get all the markings in place. So the next time you see me, hopefully all the markings will be in place, and we'll be looking at giving it sealing coats before adding the final finish to this model. So I'm just going to continue with this, and I'll see you next time. Okay, so we've finished off putting all the decals on. Now I've used a mix of the kit decals, extra decals, and also a draw decal sheet for 1 or 2 of the smaller items. Whilst applying them, I've used all of the available micro set and sol, solver set in some places, and unfortunately we've still got a little bit of silvering showing through in one or two places. It's not major, but I dislike silvering intensely and will do almost anything to get rid of it. So one of the things I've discovered over the last few years is that this Mr. Colour levelling thinner is very good at softening decals. So quite often I use it as a kind of a softening solution for decals. Now you have to be very careful if you're going to use a brush or anything to brush it across a decal. You only do one pass with it, or the decal will literally melt and you'll completely destroy the decal and potentially the paint finish as well. Mr. Colour levelling thinner is a solvent based thinner, although it's not a hot one like the European ones. It won't melt plastic, but it does have it can have quite a big effect on paints and decals. So what I've actually discovered that I can do is, using my airbrush, if I just turn the pressure right down, so hopefully you can hear that pressure's right down, okay, and then if I use the airbrush to lightly airbrush over the areas where I've applied decals, like there's some small decals on top of the engine pylons, you can get it on there quite wet. And then it will immediately go to work on softening the decal and pulling it into detail. Now, I know quite a lot of you're often advised when you're using decal setters and softeners not to touch the decal because you'll distort it and damage it. That is especially important if you're going to try this method. Okay, you do not touch this until it's bone dry again. So we've got some little markings over the over some of the hatches, okay, which I can see are silvering, not awfully, but bad enough that I certainly want to do something about it. So it's gently applying a very wet coat of the thinner on there. Now this softens everything it comes into contact with, okay, because we've used Tamiya gloss for the gloss coat, and now we're using this thinner over the top of it. So you can actually watch, if you spray this on, you can actually watch the silvering sort of disappear as the carrier film melts. And so I'm just working over all the areas where I've applied decals in the last half an hour or so, giving it a light. Like I say, as with all these wet coats that I say, you want it to be wet but not so it runs. And whatever you do, do not touch the decal. And you can go back over these. Once the thinner's flashed off, you can go back over decals that you've already applied the second time. And it's not really, how it works on the decal isn't really a function of how long you've left the decal to dry initially. Okay, this will work on perfectly dry decals because it is a solvent attacking the decal rather than just softening it. It is quite remarkable if you hold it up to the light where you can see the silvering, and you can just watch that silvering literally melt away into nothing. So I hope that's useful to you. You can, like I say, you can use a brush, but it is considerably riskier if you use a brush. This is a method that, whilst it looks quite extreme, as long as you use an airbrush on low pressure, the chances of it actually going wrong are very minimal. and you can just keep applying it. Part of it is I've pierced all the decals as you saw me do earlier, so the thinner actually gets under the decal as well and works on both sides of the decal varnish, and also works on the paint finish itself to soften everything and pull everything in together. So there, if you're having trouble with some really sort of recalcitrant decals that won't go down properly, try this. Okay, I'm just going over some of the walkways that I can see a bit of silvering on from when I've applied them. Getting a good wet coat over it. Now you can probably see as the varnish attacks the paint and the decal, the tone changes, it lightens around the area where the thinner is. That's nothing to worry about, that will disappear as it dries. Okay, so I can see the decals that I've sprayed that over, I can see they pulled right down into the detail now, so I can let those dry firmly, let those dry thoroughly, and then we can go back and have a look and see if there's any areas that need retouching. But you can carry on doing this for as long as you need to. I've done them. I did this yesterday over all of these walkways and the refueling decal and all that sort of stuff on top here, and now catching the light in all directions. There's absolutely no silvering at all on that. So once this is dry and we're happy with that, it's going to get a really thin coat of the Tamiya gloss again, probably thinned back 70–75% with thinner, and it will get a thin coat of that over the top to seal all the decals in, give the aircraft a uniformly gloss finish, and then we can look at the final finishing varnish for it. So we're sort of on the home straight now. I've got other details to do. I've got the undercarriage doors to clean up and paint. I've got the nose wheel to do, and stuff to do with the rear ramp that needs addressing. So still you know, a little way to go, not hugely far, but we're getting there now. We're getting towards the home straight on it. So stay tuned, and I'll see you next time, hopefully for the finishing stages.